Have you ever gone quiet on someone, not out of anger, but because some part of you needed them to feel what your absence actually weighed? And on the other side, has someone ever gone silent on you, and you spent days replaying every message, searching for the sentence that broke something? If either of those sounds familiar, comment yes below, because what you're about to hear will change how you interpret every silence for the rest of your life. Here's what almost nobody tells you. We treat being ignored as the absence of communication, as nothing happening. But silence has never been nothing. It's a message delivered without words, and most people never learn how to read it, so it ends up controlling them instead. To understand why, we have to start with what happens inside your brain the moment someone goes quiet. You don't just wait, you search. Your mind starts generating explanations, and it rarely reaches for the kind ones first. This isn't a personality flaw. It's a documented psychological pattern called the need for cognitive closure, studied extensively by psychologist Ari Kruglansky. His research found that human beings experience genuine discomfort when faced with ambiguity, and that discomfort pushes us to manufacture an answer, any answer, just to make the unknown feel resolved. An unanswered text isn't neutral to your nervous system. It's an open file your brain refuses to leave closed. So it fills the gap, usually with the worst version of the story. Not because that version is true, but because a bad ending often feels more bearable than no ending at all. Imagine sending a close friend a completely ordinary message. Hours pass, then an entire day. By evening, you've already replayed your last conversation, convinced yourself they're upset, and started apologizing in your head for something you're not even sure happened. The next morning they reply, "Sorry, my phone died." Reality never changed. The only thing that changed was the story your mind wrote while it waited for certainty. That single mechanism explains something strange. Why a single unanswered message can hijack an entire day. It was never really about the message. It was about your mind's intolerance for the unknown. But here's where the story gets more complicated, because not all silence comes from the same place, and confusing them is exactly why people misread each other so often. Some silence comes from overwhelm, someone shutting down because they don't yet have the emotional vocabulary to respond calmly. Some comes from avoidance, where saying nothing feels safer than admitting a truth they're not ready to face. And then there's a third category, colder and far more deliberate. Silence used as leverage. Of course, human behavior is rarely that simple. Sometimes people go quiet because they're grieving, mentally exhausted, dealing with anxiety, or simply need space they don't yet know how to ask for. That's why context always matters. But when silence becomes a repeated pattern instead of a temporary response, it stops being just a reaction and starts becoming information about how that person handles conflict, discomfort, and emotional responsibility. This is the one worth slowing down for because it isn't accidental. It's a decision, and every decision is a window into intention. Consider a well-documented pattern in relationship psychology called the principle of least interest, first described by sociologist Willard Waller in the 1930s while studying dating dynamics among college students. Waller observed that in many relationships, the person who is less emotionally invested often has greater influence over the relationship's direction because they have less to lose if it ends. Deliberate silence can sometimes become an expression of this principle. It shifts the emotional burden onto the other person, making them more likely to reach out first, apologize, or seek reassurance. Now pause on that because it reframes something important. When silence becomes a strategy rather than an emotional response, its effectiveness depends on you not recognizing it for what it is. The moment you do, its power begins to fade. Manipulation thrives in confusion. Clarity weakens it. This is exactly what the Stoics understood, long before psychology had language for any of it. Epictetus argued in his Enchiridion that we are disturbed not by events, but by the judgments we form about them. Silence by itself is simply the absence of words. It doesn't arrive carrying meaning. meaning appears the moment our minds begin interpreting it. Someone going quiet is simply an event. The 3 sleepless nights that follow, the imagined arguments, the endless mental rehearsals, that isn't the silence. That's the story you've attached to it. Here's a real example that shows exactly how this plays out. In his book, Never Split the Difference, former FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss explains that experienced negotiators often use silence deliberately after making a point or asking a question. The silence creates psychological pressure, and people frequently rush to fill the uncomfortable space by revealing more information or making concessions they hadn't planned to make. It works because humans naturally struggle with unresolved uncertainty. Now bring that back to personal relationships. That doesn't mean every silent person is trying to manipulate you. Sometimes silence is healthy, sometimes it's necessary. But in certain situations, the very same psychological discomfort that makes silence effective in negotiation can also make it an effective tool for control. Whether it's punishment, a test of your investment, or an attempt to regain the upper hand, the strategy relies on one thing: your discomfort with not knowing. Once you understand that, you stop asking the question that keeps you trapped. Why are they doing this to me? Instead, you begin asking a far better question. What does choosing this behavior reveal about them? And that shift changes everything, because someone's conflict style under pressure is rarely a one-time event. It's often a preview. The way a person handles tension when communication becomes uncomfortable frequently predicts how they'll handle future conflicts too. You're not just being ignored in that moment. You're being shown a pattern. Whether it's healthy or unhealthy is something only time and consistency can reveal. This brings us to Marcus Aurelius, who wrote his private reflections not for an audience, but as reminders to himself, one of which insists that we do not control other people's actions, only our own responses to them. That's not just Stoic philosophy. It's a practical filter for everyday life. You cannot control why someone chose silence. You cannot control what they intended by it, but you can control whether you hand them your peace of mind while they do it. And that choice determines whether their silence gains power over you or simply passes through you. So here's the insight worth carrying with you long after this video ends. The next time silence lands on you, resist the urge to ask what you did wrong. Ask instead what that silence reveals. Sometimes it reveals someone who genuinely needs time and space. Other times, it reveals someone who avoids responsibility, fears honest conversation, or reaches for control when things become uncomfortable. Your job isn't to guess which one it is. Your job is to observe the pattern without surrendering your peace. Because silence doesn't just reveal your fears. It can also reveal another person's character. And character is always louder than words. Sometimes the loudest thing a person will ever tell you isn't what they choose to say. It's what they repeatedly choose not to say. If this changed the way you'll interpret the next silence you experience, or made you rethink one you've used yourself, tell me about it in the comments. And if this genuinely gave you something worth carrying with you, consider subscribing, because there's more of this coming.